What is going on, guys? It's Motherboard here. Welcome back to another Xbox Series X video. So as you can see here, I have the Xbox Series X Build It Yourself edition. So it is completely in pieces. So this is the result of the previous video where I showed you guys how to disassemble the Xbox Series X piece by piece so you could get access to the SSD, which is right here. And of course, you know, being able to access all the different PCBs, the two motherboards, get access to the chip, the fan for cleaning, for repairing purposes, modifications, whatever it is you're wanting to do. That is that covered in the previous video. But now, of course, I have to put it all back together again because I want this to be a working console. So that's what I'm covering in this video. So if you've opened up your Xbox Series X and you're not quite sure how to put it all back together again, then don't worry about it because you can follow this video, and by the end of it, we should have all of this turned back into a working Xbox Series X console. So yeah, let's get into this. So the first thing we're going to do is put the heatsink back on the chip. So to do that, we're going to first of all clean off the old thermal compound. So if you haven't already done that, this chip will be full of you know, thermal paste, grey thermal paste. So you're just going to get a paper towel and, you know, wipe all that stuff off. Once you've done that, you want to get some rubbing alcohol, some isopropyl alcohol, and just use a bit of that on the paper towel to also clean off the rest of the thermal paste that's on there. So you want to do that, get that nice and clean. Then you want to do the same thing on the heatsink. So this will have this grey thermal paste on, and you're just going to try and clean that off as best you can. So use a paper towel first of all, kitchen roll, something like that, just dry. Then use the rubbing alcohol to finish it off to get it nice and clean. If there's any other little bits of thermal paste, you can use a Q-tip or cotton bud to remove it from the sides, just to get more precision there when you're cleaning it off. Okay, so once you have it cleaned, you're going to first of all make sure that you have all of these blue pads. There should be 4 on this side, 3 on these sides right here. And of course you've got this strip along here. That is needed to conduct the heat from these memory chips through to the heatsink so that they can be cooled properly as well. So then we're going to use some thermal paste. So this is Arctic MX4, which will do. So we're going to use some of this. So you're going to put some on the chip. So you can do the P method or the blob. Some people say you should only use a very small amount of thermal paste. Some people use loads. For the most part, it doesn't make a huge difference, if any. So now we're going to take this heatsink and put it on. Now, if you've removed the heatsink from the kind of casing, this aluminium block, then you're going to have to obviously reattach it. So it just uses these little silver screws. They have a little bit of red paint on the thread, so you know which ones go on the heatsink. To connect the heatsink, this copper block to the aluminium block, the big one. So just do that if you have separated those two. And then once you've done that, you can then put this on like this, just on top. You just want to line it up like that and then turn it round so it's upside down. So next we have the X clamp. So the X clamp goes on like this, where these two black parts are not over any significant components, because if you have it round this way, then this part here is going to be over these resistors and it's going to be pushing down into them. So we don't want that, so we want it round this way, so they're not over any significant components. The screws we're going to use are these screws right here, these 4 kind of large silver screws. And of course there are Torx screws. So you'll need a Torx, I think 8 screwdriver, 8 or 9. Okay, so you're just going to add the screw, but you're not going to put it in too tight. Just leave it loose and then do the next one. And you want to do the opposite one. So the one that's on the opposite end to the one you just did. And the last one. And you're just going to now start to tighten them up. So we'll start tightening this one up. And then the opposite end. So bear in mind that you want to make sure that these screws are down enough so that you can get the covering on, so they're not obscuring the covering. So they should be just about level with the side here, this little metal rim. So it should be pretty much the same height as that, maybe a tiny bit over, but that should do right there. So you can then get the little metal covering for the X-clamp and line it up. Line this flat part, this flat edge up with the flat edge on here, and then it should just pop on. No problems there. And this freaking blue stuff goes all over your fingers. This kind of thermal blue tack like stuff. Anyway, so we're going to grab the SSD here. So the SSD just pops on to the slot at kind of a 45-degree angle, and then you just lay it flat. And the screw for the SSD is this one here. So it's a smaller black screw than the other black screws with a little bit of blue paint on it. So it's the smallest black screw that you have. That is the one for the SSD. I'm going to stick the screw in, hold it down flat until it's secure. Then you can pop the cover on, which has the thermal pads on it, because this SSD does heat up significantly. So you're going to want to make sure you remember to put this covering on, or it will overheat and you'll possibly damage it over time. Okay, so for the most part, that's the board put back on. So next we have this ribbon cable. So this side here that has the plastic bit that you can pull, that goes on to the other motherboard. So it's this one that has no plastic piece on it. It plugs into this. And remember, it kind of curls round this way. So we're going to plug it in here. There we go, it's in. There is a black line, as you can see. There's a black line on the slot. Just make sure that black line lines up with the slot perfectly, and it's not kind of at an angle, like horizontal, because then it means it's kind of only in on one side and not the other. So you want to make sure that that is flat, and then you are good to go. So now you can place the aluminium block on top. You're going to thread this cable through this slit here, and then you're going to place this in the correct position. So you grab the second motherboard here and place it on top like this, and then we're going to plug this into the slot to connect the two motherboards together. There we go. Okay, so we're making good progress. Okay, so the next two things you're going to need: this little plastic bit to hold the power cable that runs to this plug right here. So we're going to need this. This goes around this way. So, you know, these two plastic bits line up with these two holes, and this little bit that sticks out lines up with this screw hole. So we're going to pop that in the correct position. Just there. It will be kind of loose, that's fine. Then we're going to put this plate on here, flat down like that. And then all around here, these take the little black screws, the ones that you have the most of, basically. These black screws with the little blue paint on the thread. Okay, so that's how you want it. So you've got those screws all in there. You do not have a screw in here actually, or here. So leave those ones with no screw in them, and no screw in this top one either. So now we've got that on, we've got to add the Wi-Fi chip that goes along the side here. Yeah, which is this one here, the longer one. So slide it into the slot, plug it in, and just sit it on top here. And then of course you've got another 3 screws, and these are, I believe, the same screws basically. So the same ones with the blue threads you're going to put on here. Okay, so now we've got all of that done. So the next thing we're going to do is put the power supply unit on. So it sits on top of this metal plate here. So just make sure these little holes here line up with these right here at the back. So just like that. Pops on like that. Pretty simple. Then this cable right here, of course, goes in this little black cable routing piece. So close that, then try and plug in the connector. Can be a bit fiddly, but I think I think that's in. So then there's this little two-prong Molex connector that goes into this slot right here. Make sure you plug that in. And then we need the DVD drive, power, and data cables to be plugged in as well. Yeah, so generally we're going to plug in the power cable for the disk drive, the part that goes into the motherboard. And then we're also going to plug in the SATA data cable. Now the data cable, you want this white part of the data cable plugged in to the motherboard side, like that. So these should kind of be naturally curling up in this direction towards me. So the next thing we need to do is put on the kind of covering that goes on top of that. So this part here. So the way this goes on is we just move this cable out the way, place this over, make sure you route the power and data cables for the disk drive through this hole, this big gap, and then we're just gonna like that, and we are good. So then of course this cable routes through this little cable routing clip, and you can close that over like that. Alright, so now we're just going to have to put in all of the screws. So there are different screws that need to go in different positions here. So of course we'll start off with the long screws here. So these are the ones that go right through and hold basically everything together. So you'll be able to tell naturally where the screw's meant to go, because if you put it in one of the screw holes and it pretty much falls all the way down, then you know that that is the right screw. Like if I try and put it in this one, it doesn't go down far enough. If I put it in this one, it does go down far enough. So that's basically your indicator right there of where these long screws are supposed to go. So that one, as you can see, goes all the way down. And this one at the side here goes all the way down, and this one right here goes all the way down. And then there's one other longer screw, which I think is for one of the ones for holding this power cable on. That one. Yeah, this one here at the side. So you can see there for the power cable, or the power slot where the power cable plugs in, there's a long screw meant to go in that side as well. So that's where all your long screws go. So we'll just screw those in. So that's all of the long screws in. Now what you'll find is there's other similar looking screws to those long ones that are a bit shorter, about half the length. So there's 3 of those ones. For the power cable, 2 of these go in where the power cable plugs in. So one here, and of course the other one goes in here at the back. And then the last one goes in this middle bit here. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is put in all of the screws, all the rest of the screws, apart from this one here. Do not put a screw in that one. But all the other ones that you see, you can fill in with those same black screws as before, the ones with the little blue paint on the thread. All of those, use those screws for all of the other screw holes that you see, apart from the one I pointed out. Okay, so that should be all the screws in now, apart from that one that we left out. The reason we left that one out, the one that's right here, is because this little metal piece sits on top like that, and then you add the screw. So we just do that and then add the screw. So we flip this over to its side here. We've then got the other Wi-Fi chip that plugs in here. So this is the smaller one. So just plug it in. So just plug it in like that. And then you have the 3 screws that go along here. These are these 3 kind of wide screws. Okay, so you've pretty much got the console back together now. This is the whole console essentially. We just got to get it in the case and add the ribbon cables. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is put on this kind of anti-vibration band that goes around the whole thing. And this essentially, it does say aluminium heatsink on this. So that you know that this larger bit is to go on top of the heatsink. You know which way it goes. These kind of strips that stick out should be on the outside not round like this on the inside. And then there will be a little kind of slit right there that goes over this plastic piece. So we're just going to try and kind of stretch that out and put it over that. And then it just wraps around the whole console, round to the other side. So then on this side, there's a little latch there, a little plastic piece. Do this one first actually, so it's on there properly, and then do this one. That's better. There we go. All right, so that's it. That's the pretty much the whole console put back together. Kind of line these up with these holes here. And it's got PSU written there as well, so you know this bit goes over the power supply to orientate it properly. So that's it. That's the whole console basically put back together in terms of the actual hardware. All we need to do is put it back in the case now, the plastic casing. But before we do that, we also did remove the RF board, the other little boards to the USB port and to the power button and eject button. So we're going to put those back in first before we put this whole thing back in the case. So let's do that now. I know this is quite hard to see. So the way this goes in is it goes in this way around. It just slots in here. So if I lean this forward, maybe you can see better. We essentially put this bit here goes over this plastic part. Try and get it as flush to the side as possible, and then it should just slot in, and then you just have one screw there that you need to put in to hold that in place. And you may be wondering what type of screw. Again, it's one with the little blue paint on it. We're going to go ahead and screw that in. So now that's not going to come out. So that is that board now attached. So next thing we need to do is do the front board, the RF board that goes in here, which is your board for your power button and eject button, and possibly for the controller to connect to the console as well. So that's this one right here. It's got a ribbon cable. You just plug that back in if you've taken it off. So the way this goes in, obviously this is the power button at this end, so it goes on upside down like this, and we just slot it into place down here so it lines up with the screw holes. Pretty simple. And then you just put the screws in. There's 4 screws. There are these kind of wide screws with small threads, so those are the ones that we're going to use to put this board back in. So that's the RF board in as well. And then this just lines up with the side of the case. You can see these little kind of see-through plastic bits line up over these plastic bits that stick out. So you just line those up there, stick this back on, so it comes right up to here. And now we should be ready to just put the console back together. Okay, so I've turned this around the right way. So that's the top of the console, bottom of the console. So the way we're going to put this in is round like this. So pull this up here, and we're just going to slide this in like so. So we've got this ribbon cable that needs to go on. So the black part plugs into the motherboard. The part with the kind of see-through tab goes into this board down here. So we should be able to do this. Guess I can put it on top. Is it supposed to go on top? Yeah, it is meant to be on top anyway. So we're going to plug this in. Now, as I showed before, there's a little latch on this tab that you can pull out, and that opens that slot up so that you can then plug this into the slot. And then once it's in, get a screwdriver, close that tab up, and it should now be locked in place as it is. So then we're just going to thread this down. If I pull this out a bit, I can get this all the way down like that, down a bit further, and then we just plug this into this slot here. We can't really get the best angle on this, unfortunately, but you just line it up and push it in And then again, we have this ribbon cable, which is probably one of the more tricky ones to plug in. One for the RF board. Can be tricky sometimes. Obviously you don't want to force it, but that's that one in as well. So that's all the ribbon cables plugged in. So now we're going to push this to the base of the console. I don't know how I'm going to show this, but you want to push this down to the bottom so that these little metal bits that stick out are poking through these holes at the bottom. That's how you know it's flush against the bottom, as it should be. So then we're going to add the disk drive, which just goes into this slot here. So here's the disk drive, goes in this way around. So we're just going to slot it in. It's going to feel wrong because it's all loose, but you're just going to plug in the data cable and the power cable for the Blu-ray drive. Then this plastic piece goes in. It goes around this way, so this hole lines up with the screw hole. You have to kind of pull the disk drive towards you to create a gap so you can fit this in like that. And that should sit there, and that should keep the disk drive in place. Okay, so then you have a screw here. So the remaining screws that you should have left, you should have some black ones left, but they're different to the ones with the that had the little blue paint on them. These ones have kind of wider threads on them, so slightly bigger, fatter, chunkier screws. Those are the ones that you're going to use from now on for the most part. So that one goes in here. Then turning this upside down is not a good idea when I don't have the screws in, but there's also black screw there that you want to put in at the base, and then of course also around here black screw as well goes in there. Okay, so once you've got those two black screws in, you have another 3 screw holes. Screw there, and a screw right here. And those are your kind of green, silvery green screws that you're going to want to put in there. I'll just put a picture up actually. So here's a picture so you know where all those screws go, because couldn't really get a very good angle on those. So finally the stand has to go on. And so on the stand there is this little bit here that you can see, these kind of 3 points that stick out. They need to line up with this bit right here, this little latch that you pull up and twist to get this out. So you just want to line this up with that. So in this case, this bit lines up with that. So we put it on like this, right there. There we go. It just locks into place, and that is the stand on. All right, we are pretty much there. So all we have left really is the fan and the back casing to go on. So the fan just slots in like this, slots down like that. The power cable for the fan plugs in here, and then you can route the cable like that. Then we have 2 more of these black screws that go in these 2 locations right here. And then finally you have this bigger screw, this really wide screw right here that goes in the middle of the fan. That is it, basically put back together. All we need is the back panel here. So the way that you put this in, this case, the back panel, is you essentially slot it in like this at the top, in a kind of angle, 45-degree angle in, and then you just push down. And then there's 2 clips that will stick out a little bit there. So just push those in at either side, and then push down, and that's it. Those clips are all in, and we are good. And then lastly 2 screws here, which should be your last remaining screws, which are these 2 kind of green silvery screws that go into these 2 slots right here. Okay, and that's essentially it. I mean, there's also this sticker here, this little one that covers the screw. You can put that back on. And there it is. Okay, so we'll lift this up. Plug in the power cable right there. And the HDMI. Plug those in. See what we get here. So turns on, that's a good sign. On my monitor. Yep, there it goes. You can hear the disk drive spinning up as well, which means that that's working. So yep, disk drive is working. Crash nitro fields detected. Obviously, if the storage drive wasn't plugged in, it probably wouldn't even boot. And of course, the game's installed, so obviously the storage drive has been detected too. So yeah, that's basically it, guys. That's how you fully put back together the Xbox Series X from start to finish. So we started with a bunch of pieces of Xbox, and now it's built into a working console. And as you can see, it is indeed running right now. So yeah, and of course the previous video I showed you how to disassemble it piece by piece so you can get access to the SSD, to the chip, to the two motherboards, to all the Wi-Fi PCBs, the front power and eject PCB, the USB and sync button PCB. All of that was covered in the previous video showing how to disassemble the console, and now this video showed you how to fully put it back together. So stay tuned for more hardware level tutorials on the Xbox Series X. We're going to be taking the SSD out and putting it in the computer just to see what happens when you take a Series X SSD and you put it in your computer. Can you browse the SSD? Can you use it as a storage drive in your computer? Or does it use some proprietary format where it's not going to work, or some kind of encryption where it's not going to work in a computer? So we're going to be covering that. I'm going to be covering changing the LED with different colored LEDs for the power button. I'll do the same on the controller. I'll be doing a disassembly video how to take apart the Xbox Series X controller as well. And I'll also possibly be doing videos like installing LED strips to try and get like LED light coming from these holes instead of just this kind of green plastic that's on the inside. So yeah, we'll be doing a lot more stuff with the Series X. I'll also be doing similar things with the PlayStation 5. So stay tuned to the channel if you're interested in any of that. So hope you guys enjoyed the video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.